Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to attempt to install the diff. So there's a few things that you need to check first of all. You need to be absolutely sure if you're doing this on your own that you can do it. This diff is extremely heavy. I'm going to have it balanced on a trolley jack, and if you are absolutely not sure you can do it, then get a friend who can help you support it. I've done it maybe 5 or 6 times in the past, so I'm pretty confident. So the next thing that you need to double check is that all your bolts are ready to go. You don't want the diff hanging around, wobbling around, and your bolts aren't handy and ready to go. So you can see that I've laid out all my bolts here. Also, another thing to double check is the instructions tell me that the thread in the nose of my diff is 1.5. In actual fact, on my diff it's 1.25, so a much finer thread. So I've got the correct bolts, all 8.8 strength, and I've double checked everything's ready to go and screws in nicely. There's no powder coat in the way to get out. So with that, I think we're going to get started. Okay, so here we go. I've got my diff balanced, and I'm just going to pump up the trolley jack. Okay, we're just going to shift it in a little bit now. Okay, and then we're going to pump it up a bit more, but we're really nearly there. Not too high, because I don't need to have the extra effort of lowering it at all. So we're approaching there. There we go. Just a little bit higher. Okay, and now just edge it forward. I need to line up everything. Okay, so I need about another 5 or 6 mil here. Nearly there. Nearly there. Ooh. Okay, that's all lining up. That's all good. Fantastic. Right, I'm just going to latch this up. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm just going to latch that on. And then, so it's not going to fall anywhere. Okay, that was pretty successful. So now we're just going to, I'm just going to jimmy this around a little bit now that it's safe and held in place. Get these back bolts through, and then we'll worry about undoing these and doing them back up with a washer, etc. So that actually wasn't too difficult. Luckily my garage floor is pretty smooth, and I kept a good centre of balance on my trolley jack. So now I've got a lot of the bolts engaged, so I can drop the trolley jack out of the way and just jimmy the diff into position a little better. I'm going to remember to use thread lock on the nose bolts. Also on the nose bolts, the holes on the chassis might not be quite lined up, so it's a good idea to start attaching the bolts now and do it up, and it'll draw it all in and flush together. Or alternatively, just open up the bolt holes slightly. But it's all looking good. I'm going to go and get some washers for these nuts and do it all up nice and flush. See you in a minute. Okay, so the diff is all in successfully. As you can see, the front of the diff is nicely flush up against here. Bolts are nicely tightened, got plenty of thread showing. The nose of the diff, nice and flush up against this front plate here. Totally drawn in, thread lock on these bolts, and I've got spring washers as well. And we've just got the 4 spacers around the back. So, successful install. Continuing with all things diff, we're going to install the lower wishbones now on the rear. Now, to make sure you don't get hindered with your build, you need to make sure you've got these large washers These are 1.5 inch by 7/8 inch internal diameter. You need 8 of them, so get ordering now if you haven't got them in your inventory. They're not actually listed in the inventory list. You just realise that you need them going through the instructions. So get hold of some of those and let's crack on. Okay, first things first, do a dry fit. Make sure that your bolts will all fit through the required holes, and you don't need to take off any powder coat or anything. Also make sure you got the correct side wishbone all set up. This was actually labelled up incorrectly. This was labelled up as offside, and it's actually the near side one. When it's installed, it's going to be this kind of straighter edge against the front, and obviously this is the cut for the suspension. So we're going to have a go at installing it all now. Okay, so these are quite heavy and unwieldy, so put loads of cardboard down just to protect your paintwork. And now the order of installation is through the wishbone, through 2 washers, and then through the rear diff mount in here. Now I have checked that everything fits, but unless you get everything absolutely square, it's quite difficult to get it all moving. So I might have to just tap it with a hammer in a minute. So after this, the next bit is this tube, and I'm just going to stick some more coppery grease in here. Just put it all around the bolt as well, but you can never have too much. So we are all set there. Okay, so then this slides on. Hopefully you've got enough room to get that on. I might just have to back this out slightly. So that's how I can get it on there. There we go. And now we continue pushing the bolt through. Let's just have a little tap with the hammer. Remember, you need to fit 2 washers after the wishbone here, and then continue tapping the bolt all the way through and secure with another washer and nylock. So let me just tap that through. Okay, so the wishbones are fitted on both sides now. Now I did have an issue that I didn't have enough thread showing where the bolt fits on this end. So after talking to AK, they suggested that I can remove one of the washers from here and one of the washers from here, and that then gave me enough thread length on the end. So I've now got just over a full circle of thread showing past the nut. So they then confirmed that you need to do them up as tight as possible. So with that all done, we are now going to fit these rear hubs. Okay, so the hubs are pretty simple. Make sure you've got the correct hub for the correct side. The caliper for the rear disc brakes is going to be kind of facing towards the front of the car. The next most important thing is you've got these fulcrum spacers, so they need to go on each end. Don't forget those. And then with liberal amounts of copper grease, let's just wedge that in there. You should be able to just get it all the way through. There we go. Okay, so washer on the end and a nylock, and we're all done there and ready for the drive shafts. Now, drive shafts may need to be fitted a couple of times, and that is because you might need to adjust the shims to achieve an angle when you put your angle device against this edge here of between 0 and 0.5 degrees. So you might need to adjust the shims. There's various shims. You get a large plate like this, or you get the thinner plates like this. And between them, you'll be able to adjust the angle quite finely. Now, because nylocks are kind of a one fit item, I use some old nylocks, or you should use some bolts, some nuts that are non-nylock. So you can fit this a couple of times, adjust the angle, and then for your final fitting, put on the nylocks. I also do the same with the main bolt here. I have an old bolt, so I don't ruin the bolts that I'm going to use for the final tightening. The reason I don't use the final nut and just use a spare nut for this adjustment is because I don't want to ruin the final nut. I believe there's a thin strip of wire inside these. I think it's called a helicoil, and when you do it up really tight, it deforms and stops the nut from being able to undo. Obviously, you don't want that to happen. It's the only thing that's keeping your wheel on at the end of the day. So I use the actual one when I do my final fitting, and when you do it up, you've got to pretty much be standing on it and do it up really damn tight. Okay, so let's have a go at fitting this other drive shaft. So I've gone for the one thick spacer first. If I need to reduce, I can go down to the 4 shims, because that's the next step down. And if I need to increase, I can just add one of the thin shims. So we've got it in there, and then wiggle. Hopefully that'll fit in there. There we go. So we're all in there. Just going to prop this up with a chock of wood, and I'm going to put on my old nylocks on here, just ready for the adjusting. And then put on my old main nut after fitting the conical washer first. Conical washer in the end, and then your main drive shaft nut. Okay, so temporary old nuts done up pretty darn tight there, holding the hub on. I've got my temporary old nylocks here. You've got to make sure your chassis is leveled left to right, and then you need to raise up this hub and measure from the very highest point here to a straight edge across the top, 150 mil. Once you've done that, you then need to measure your angle, and you do that by putting your measuring device across this cup here and measuring to get between 0 and 0.5 degrees. So I'm going to use my phone for that. It's all accurately set up, so I'll see how that goes. We're all set there. So 5 shims later, I've got a reading of 0.2. That's in at the top. I'm now going to do everything up with the good nylocks and good main nut. You've got to do up that main nut to 225 foot-pounds. You've pretty much got to be standing on that. And I'll finish up by installing the shock absorbers. Onto the shocks then. Pretty straightforward. Plenty of copper grease on the long bolt at the top here, and that just fits right through. There's a mounting point just up here in the chassis, straight through. Use washers where you need to, and then we're down at the bottom mounting point here. So I'm just going to raise the hub up so you can have to lift it. About there. Let's see if this bolt will fit through. And there we are, through. Stick a washer on, clean up the copper grease from the threads, and put on your nylocks, and that is done. So the last section of this video is going to concern the installation of the Diff tie bars. It's probably my least favourite part of the whole Diff setup. Let's have a look. Okay, so these are the Diff tie bars, one on each side going up at an angle. From AK, they were different lengths, good 5 or 6 mil different lengths. However, this may work in your favour, and it certainly did for me. So the longer of the Diff tie bars has managed to fit quite nicely up here. You can see I can get the bolts fairly engaged, and also this slightly shorter one has fitted really nicely up to this side. Now, because of the differences in these brackets on the Jaguar Diff and the Diff tie bars, you may need to just run a drill straight through and make sure you can get through to the other side, just to elongate the hole, if you like, on the other side. This one is absolutely fine straight through. This one looks to be all right straight through. I can get this top one through, and this one I'm just going to give it a little gentle persuasion. It might not need much, but otherwise I'll just run a drill through just to take off a couple of mil of the hole on the other side, and then simply do some copper grease and nuts and washers, and you're all done. Alright, so that's it from me, and the back end, the diff, the tie bars, the suspension, the hubs, all torqued up, all fitting really nicely. Quite happy with that. I'll see you again for the brakes.